Hi, this is Jessie Stoner, and I'm here today interviewing my good friend and esteemed colleague, Eileen McDargh, who I've known for many years. We first connected through the Ken Blanchard companies, and since then she went on to start her own organization, and we've met up again as we are both published by the same publisher, and have attended a lot of the same meetings together, and just have so much respect for each other. And I'm just delighted to be able to interview her today. She's the Chief Energy Officer of the Resiliency Group. She's an expert on resiliency, and our topic today is radical resiliency. Eileen McDargh has been called a hope merchant, although she says she has been put here on earth for comic relief. And I, for one, can attest to that. She's an internationally recognized keynote speaker, master facilitator, and award-winning author with expertise in resiliency and leadership. Her articles have appeared in countless publications, and 2 of her 7 books have been awarded national recognition. In 2016, Gurus International, a British-based provider of resources for leadership, communication, and sales training, also ranked her 7th of the world's top 30 communications guru, following a global survey of 22,000 business professionals. Eileen is a runner, a weightlifter, and a lover of all things dark chocolate. So I have asked Eileen to give us a brief introduction to radical resiliency, and partially because I want you to hear her voice and hear her delivering her message with the energy and clarity and enthusiasm that it just makes her so spectacular. So Eileen, welcome, and give us an introduction to radical resiliency.
Thank you, Jessie, so much. And it really sets up the context for why we're talking about this. So I would ask anyone who reads and listens to this, do any of these sound like you? Your organization has been downsized, right-sized, capsized. Perhaps you've been merged, remerged, submerged. Every time you think you know the answers, they change the questions. Up is down, down is up. Or perhaps you have the opposite challenge. Your organization is growing so fast that it's hard to maintain the pace. Business change is a daily fact of life. Perhaps you're the leader with followers looking toward you as a model to move forward in complex and demanding times. You feel stuck in a time warp and want nothing better than those good old days of career progression, linear movement, and a marketplace that's predictable and faithful. Or perhaps you've assembled a team of world-class performers, but getting them to play from the same sheet of music and honoring each other's skills appears a task worthy of Hercules. Teamwork is a fiction. Virtual teams are virtually invisible. Or perhaps you're juggling the professional and personal demands of requests that surround you 24/7, aging parent, ailing spouse, boomerang kids, or your own soul wanting more. It's all the sign of these times. In all these cases, what is needed is resiliency, not the dictionary definition of resiliency, which is bouncing back, but rather the proactive result of growing through challenge as well as opportunity. I mean, that's right, opportunity. You see, we're used to thinking about resiliency only when faced with hardship, loss, negative events. However, I believe that resiliency is a life skill. Resiliency is rooted in energy, the capacity to keep on keeping on. It's not about adversity, but advantage. It's not about pain, but possibility. Resiliency, I believe, can be learned, cultivated, and practiced. And it can be done with vision, foresight, and joy. It's all about thinking differently, learning to ask critical questions, and importantly, discovering how to listen deeply to yourself and to others.
Wow, so what an introduction. Thank you, Eileen. So that just really is exciting to think about how you frame resiliency as not just something that we do when we have adversity or when hard things happen, but that it's a life skill, and that it's something that happens during times of opportunity and advantage. So you've coined the term radical resiliency, which is very compelling. Tell me more. What exactly do you mean by radical resiliency, and how do we get there?
Well, when you think about the word radical, radical means it is apart from the norm. And just as you stated, Jesse, when we think of resiliency, we think about ways of overcoming tragedy, of overcoming hardship. Radical to me sets it apart from being event focused to life focused, meaning that if to me, resiliency is all about energy management, we need to manage our energy through every part of our life. So it's not just in the face of an event that appears negative, but also when we are faced with tremendous opportunity, when we're faced with growth. I mean, like right now, you probably have 45 things on your to-do list that are going to require a lot of energy. Well, part of the way in which you go after them is saying, how can I be resilient? How do I manage my energy in such a way that at the end of the day, I don't fall face forward on my bed exhausted, but I actually have some sense of accomplishment and joy. So that's why I think it's radical. It's not, if you look in the dictionary, the definition in the dictionary is not only is it bouncing back, but it's also, now paraphrased, but it means to take a piece of steel and bend it, and that something that is bent under pressure returns to its original position. Well, that's fine if you're a piece of steel. You and I are not pieces of steel. There's no way we're going to return to our original positions. So that's the other thing that makes my notion radical, is that it's nothing about returning to the way it was before, because you and I both know you cannot step in the same river twice. It is always going to be different. And it's learning how to live with that difference and the opportunity and the challenge that comes every day. But I actually also coined another word, presilience, which is preemptive resilience. I think preemptive resilience is that we practice these kinds of skills all the time, so that we walk through life becoming more and more change hardy, not change resistant, but change hardy.
You remind me that when you talk about that it's not possible to bounce back, that we're actually probably thinking about it all wrong. I love what you say about managing energy, and it really makes me think a lot. I was thinking that resiliency was like building a muscle, but it's probably more than that, because it's not a muscle so that you can muscle your way through it. It sounds more like it's connected with some of these other things that you talk about, like joy and growing and capacity. I love what you say about it being a life skill. What are the things that we need to do to develop this skill and this mindset or way of being?
I'm going to work on that word that you used right now, Jesse, mindset. And I think there are 4 skills we work on: adaptability, agility, laughability, and alignment. But in order to work on those, I think we have to have a mindset. And a mindset, to me, looks at 3 things. What is my staying power? What is my stamina? And what is my soulfulness? So if I take that first word, staying power, is because these are choice points all the time. Do I have the staying power, the mindset that says, I want to stay in this game for the long term? I want to stay in this marriage for at least another month. I want to stay with this company for 3 more years until I get my retirement. I mean, those sound very cut and dried, but staying power is saying, am I willing to do what it takes to be able to stay the course? Or do I have the staying power that says I might not choose this course, but I can stay in the game for another course? So I think staying power is a real important mindset. I think it also says, what is it that I'm willing to do? Staying power can require innovation. If I'm going to stay in the game, I can't keep doing the same things the way I've always done it, because remember, the river has changed. So it looks at what is what do I need to do for innovation? How do I need to respond differently? It also says, where's my locus of control? I'm going to be speaking with a group this summer, and they are in government, and they deal with budgets. Will you tell me how much control people who are purchasing agents in government and budgets have? They don't have a heck of a lot of control over the budget, but there are things that they can do as how they think about it, how they operate, what their processes are, how they can try things differently, what are the strategic alliances they might be able to create within what at face value looks like a rigid bureaucracy. So those are all the things that I think go into staying power.
So, so when you talk about staying in the game, it might be that a company could last for a long time, for example, but that it might also go through a lot of different kinds of changes in order to do that. Is that what you're talking about?
And this is where it's all a mindset. I'm going to give you two examples, and one of them comes from my family. My family, and my family side of my mother, there's a 140-year-old shoe store. It's Reinenberg Shoe Store in York, Pennsylvania. It was the first account, Jesse, that Florsheim Shoes ever had. My grandfather and his brother, and then the nephews, and now my cousin, have run this shoe store, taking great pride in what they've done. At the same time, the world has changed around them. And while literally this year we celebrate 140 years of that shoe store, there's no one to take it over. There's no one who wants to learn how to repair shoes the way my cousin does. It's in a small strip shopping center that, unless you're a longtime resident or know about Reinenberg's, chances are you're probably going to buy some things online. So Bob, my cousin Bob, has got to decide, does he have the staying power to try to fight and find someone who wants Reinenberg's, or is it time to make another decision? Because as wonderful as that shoe store is, how as proud of it as I am, it's probably has run its course. On the flip side, there's another organization that I spoke to. It's a software company. It's over, and I have to go back and be accurate, but it literally is decades old. And yet it continues to be ranked among one of the top 5 places to work for in the United States. And one of the things that allows a software company to do it is constantly looking at how do we reinvent ourselves? How do we make this organization a place where people want to be with us and grow? It's Ultimate Software. I am so tremendously impressed by this organization. And it has got the most faithful, engaged employees that you can imagine. And so there's 2 different mindsets. One is obviously on the retail side, which is going to be something different than the software side. But I think that the mindsets, the staying power of both of them can be seen as very different constructs.
So, and I do want to hear more about the other 2 that you mentioned, but I just have one more comment on this. So, because I was really touched by your story about your cousin. So staying power isn't necessarily, I'm going to hang in there and scrape my fingernails along the borders and dragging me out. But it's really, it sounds to me like it's staying present and engaged and making conscious decisions about what your involvement is going to be.
Jesse, that is a beautiful way that you just reframed that.
Yeah.
It's the way, am I going to stay in the game of life?
Yeah.
And, we all know people who have given up. They're not grown-ups, they're given-ups.
Yeah.
And there's some 30-year-olds who are given-ups. I see myself as, if it's not, maybe it's chapter 3, or act, what I think of as not chapters, really act 3. So that if this chapter of my life closes and I choose to close it, how do I have the staying power for what would be the next phase?
Right. Yeah. So what you're saying is that it's not necessarily around the specifics. The staying power is around engagement.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Engagement with an entity, engagement with other people, engagement with life.
Great. So tell me about, you also mentioned stamina. Tell me what you mean by stamina and how that is a mindset that supports radical resiliency.
If you think about stamina, which is a wonderful word that Suzanne Kolbasa and one of her colleagues came up with, and they talked about stamina as being your mental, emotional, physical hardiness. So if you think about stamina as having the ability to keep on keeping on. So first off, what is your mental construct that either gives you energy or zaps it? Let me give you an example. The woman who was the illustrator in one of my books, an amazing artist, the illustrations that she did for my book are the last wonderful drawings she will ever do, because she developed such bad carpal tunnel she can no longer hold a picture. Her stamina is such, and her staying power is saying, I can't do the painting, but I have the mental, emotional, physical ability to say, oh, what's next? And for her, I mean, how's this for different? She is now raising sulkies, you know, those dogs that look kind of like Afghan hounds? She's raising dogs. She doesn't have to have the ability to hold a pencil or a pen, but she is raising dogs. And there is an immense amount of physicality if you are raising dogs. There's an emotional component because you are connected to these dogs. And of course, there's the whole mental construct that says, how do I breed them? How do I care for them? So she's got, in this Act 3, her staying power, she's now using this stamina. I also think of it as grit.
Yeah.
And I love that word grit. But I want to refine it, because when we think about grit, we think about people clenching their teeth, holding on, and it really, really, really hurts. I think of grit as being deep determination, a willingness, you know, I am determined I will see this thing through. I think that is stamina. And what supports our stamina? A number of things. That, number one, to realize that I don't have to do this by myself. I think the importance of having support people around us, Jesse, is so critical in this world of constant change. And I want to acknowledge you right now as being one of my dear special colleagues whose support has always been so incredible of me. And I think on the times in which I might not want to stay the course, you have always come back and said something or done something for me that has allowed me to take another step forward. And I hope many people have a Jesse Stoner in their life.
It's not hard to be there for you, Eileen, that's for sure.
I mean, but it's so important. And I really would like people to hear that. If you don't have a support network, you need to start building one, because this world is far too vast and far too interconnected, at the same time unrelated. I think that's why we're seeing the fact that people will say how connected they are, but they feel very alone.
I think you make an excellent point that stamina isn't something that we do alone. Stamina is something that happens when we have the support we need to hang in there. And I agree with you 100%.
You know what renews? Here's another question. What renews our stamina? I'll tell you one thing that renews it. Exercise. Play. So for example, if I weren't sitting here, you know, talking with you, I would probably take a break and I would walk down to my beach. I'd look at the ocean. I'd say, yep, it's still there. And I would come back. That's a form of play for me. We were with little kids the other day. Oh my God, they're so adorable. Well, you get this sense of joy that comes from connecting with someone else. In this case, they were little kids who just were having the best time. That kind of play is actually also not only conducive for stamina, but also for staying power. There's a wonderful book on play, The Value of Play. And the man who observed it, and I'll think of his name in a minute, watched animals, and he realized that animals who played most were the ones who seemed to survive best in the wilderness. And he literally was looking at bear cubs. And the bear cubs who were curious, who would explore, who would play, seem to do better in the wilderness than the ones that just kind of crouched and stayed by their mom.
Wow, that just makes so much sense. So Eileen, I want to move on because I want to hear what you have to say about soulfulness. I'm very curious about that, and I'm also aware of the time. So I don't want to rush you through it, but I want to keep us moving so we can hear about it. So tell me, you mentioned the third mindset is soulfulness. What do you mean by that?
It means to fill your soul. That's exactly what it means, to fill your soul. There's a wonderful line out of Mary Oliver's, one of her poems, that said, "What will you do with your one wild, precious life?" And I interpret that to mean that what allows us to stay in the game, what creates staying power, what allows us to have the stamina, is that there is something that we are engaged in that fills our soul, that is important. And it might be the work that you do. It might be the relationship that you have. It might be the way in which you choose to go out and make an actual difference in the world. But when we are connected with that, is what we say is our purpose. And Jesse, you and I both know in the work that we've seen come up in the last couple of years, purpose is becoming more and more critical, particularly among millennials. Why am I here? I don't just want to work for a company and make a ton of money. I want to know that it matters. And so the question for all of us is, what fills my heart? What fills my soul? That allows me to stay the course.
Well, of course. So that's lovely. So it's the that resonance with what we care most deeply about that, again, that releases the energy that you're talking about that allows us to manage our energy.
Yeah, that's it. My sister is the chair of the board of United World College of Costa Rica, which is junior, senior year of high school with students from around the world who live their last 2 years of, quote, high school, though in Europe it's called college, in community. And they live in community to replicate what a world would look like if we actually were in community. So the Israeli could be rooming with the Palestinian, the young boy from India with the Pakistani. And Susan does this. It is all volunteer, Jesse. But what she says is, these young people give me hope. When I am with them and I watch their interaction, I believe that we can make a world that works for all. That's what I call soulfulness.
Yep. And it's what makes you a hope merchant.
Well, my hope in being a hope merchant, I can hold up a picture of possibilities to people where they can find where they fit within this picture. And goodness knows right now, our world needs a lot of hope merchants.
It sure does. So Eileen, I want to wrap it up, but I just want to see, are there any final thoughts that you want to share with listeners about radical resiliency?
I think there were two things. One is, there's been some talk that resiliency is a genetic trait, and you either have it or you don't. I'd like to explode that and say we all have the potential for that. We all have the potential to that. The second one is really an emphasis on the fact that it all begins with what we say to ourselves about what's going on in our life, and the ability to reframe and see what is possible versus what is impossible. And this is the time you might really need that support person to help you reframe. So you look at not what is black, but what has got a kaleidoscope of color, so that the glass is not half empty, but the glass is half full. So it's those two things, that it's not genetically based, that you have influence over it. And the second one is, it all starts with how we think about what's going on within our lives.
Well, and these mindsets really make a difference, which you explained so well. Eileen, I just want to thank you so much for an inspiring and energizing conversation. I feel like we've all gotten a really great taste of radical resiliency, and I, for one, am energized by this conversation. So,
thank you, Jesse, my dear person in support and colleague. Next time I'm going to interview you.
All right. Take care, Eileen. Thanks so much.
Thank you.